When Senator Mitt Romney leaned across the table, his eyes narrowing with that familiar, condescending edge, he questioned her experience as if it were some inconvenient fact he was willing to dismiss. Jasmine Crockett didn't flinch. Instead, she met his gaze with a calm fire that cut sharper than any insult. The room held its breath. And then, with a voice steady and unyielding, she delivered a response so precise, so devastating, that Romney recoiled speechless. No rehearsed rebuttal, no scripted comeback, just the undeniable truth hanging in the air. In that moment, everything changed. The room was thick with tension. A committee hearing on justice reform had quickly become a battlefield, where progressives demanded real change while centrists clung to cautious compromise. Mitt Romney, polished and practiced after decades in the halls of power, carefully singled out Jasmine Crockett. His question wasn't just about policy, it was a subtle, public challenge to her very right to speak, questioning her credentials with a smirk that said, "Are you really qualified for this?" Romney represented a world insulated by privilege and tradition, confident in his long career and polished demeanor. Crockett, by contrast, was the newcomer, a black woman whose relentless advocacy came from lived experience and fierce determination. This wasn't just a debate about legislation, it was a collision of generations and cultures, a fight for respect and recognition in a space too often reserved for the elite. But what happened after Romney's smug remark? What Crockett said next didn't just change the tone of that hearing, it shattered expectations and set social media ablaze. Within hours, the country was watching, riveted, and nobody would forget that moment. Mitt Romney's name carries weight: decades of service, a former presidential candidate, and a respected senator from Utah. To many, he is the embodiment of civility and decorum in politics, a steady hand in turbulent times. But beneath that polished surface lies a different truth, one of entrenched elitism and a deep-seated belief in gatekeeping. His questions, cloaked in polite language and measured tone, are far from innocent. They are tools wielded to maintain a system that values pedigree over passion, connections over conviction. Romney's long career has been shaped by privilege, the kind that comes from exclusive schools, influential networks, and an unspoken rulebook that tells some voices to step aside. To him and many of his peers, lived experience without a certificate from a prestigious institution is often seen as insufficient, even suspect. This is not just about politics. It is about preserving a hierarchy where power stays concentrated in the hands of the few who have been deemed qualified by an elite standard. When Romney questioned Crockett's experience, he wasn't just challenging one woman. He was representing an entire era, an establishment that doubts the authenticity and capability of those who don't fit their mold. His condescension was a quiet reminder that, in his world, respect is earned not through struggle or service, but through the right credentials and the right background. And yet, this moment would prove that such gatekeeping was about to be shattered. Jasmine Crockett didn't come from privilege or pedigree. She grew up working class, raised in communities where hard work was the only currency that mattered. From those roots, she carved a path as a civil rights attorney, fighting tirelessly for justice in courtrooms where voices like hers were too often ignored or silenced. Every step forward was a battle against assumptions, underestimations, and barriers built by a system designed to keep people like her out. She didn't get handed a seat at the table. She built her own chair and dragged it in herself, demanding to be seen, heard, and respected on her own terms. Crockett embodies the grit and resilience of countless Americans who refuse to accept the limits others try to place on them. She wasn't supposed to be here. The establishment didn't expect her to challenge them, let alone confront one of its most polished veterans. But here she was, calm, confident, unshaken, not asking for permission, demanding respect. And in that moment, she was about to remind Mitt Romney exactly who he was speaking to, a truth that would silence more than just one voice in that room. Mitt Romney leaned in, his posture sharp and deliberate, the weight of his years in power settling like a shadow across the room. His tone was polished, smooth, controlled but laced with unmistakable smugness. He questioned Jasmine Crockett's depth, her experience, subtly casting doubt on whether she truly had the right to weigh in on matters of justice and law. It wasn't just the words themselves, it was the way he said them, as if her voice needed his validation to matter. as if her lived experience, her tireless work, and her authority on the subject were somehow not enough. The room crackled with tension. Viewers watching at home felt a growing rage and an intense anticipation. How would Crockett respond to this thinly veiled dismissal? Romney's question was a challenge, a power play designed to put her in her place. But Jasmine Crockett wasn't here to play by the old rules. She didn't just respond. She rewrote the rules of that conversation. Senator Romney, with all due respect, I am not here to be questioned about my experience as if it's some abstract credential to be measured on a scale you control. I've spent years defending cases that most in this room wouldn't dare touch, fighting for communities crushed under systems built to ignore their pain. I've stood in courtrooms where justice was promised but never delivered. I represent people whose voices have been dismissed, whose struggles have been minimized by men who preach decorum from comfortable seats far removed from reality. These are the same men who demand civility while ignoring the cries of those they claim to serve. I fought for mothers who can't afford bail for their children, for workers denied basic rights, for families torn apart by laws that lack compassion. You ask if I have the depth to weigh in on these issues? I live this depth. I breathe it. My experience isn't a resume to be doubted. It's a story written in the fight for justice, day after day, in places where power rarely listens. Senator, I didn't get here because someone opened a door for me. I got here because I kicked one in. The room fell silent. Romney's smirk vanished, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. His age shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting away. The audience, both in the chamber and beyond, held their breath, electrified by the power of her words. This wasn't just a rebuttal. It was a seismic shift, a reminder that truth, when spoken with courage and conviction, can topple even the most polished facades. And as the tension thickened, one thing was clear. Jasmine Crockett had seized the moment, and nothing in that room would ever be the same again. Within minutes, social media exploded. Hashtags like Crockett Clapback and Respect the Work began trending nationwide, flooding timelines with clips, memes, and powerful soundbites from the hearing. TikTok creators remixed her words into viral videos, layering her sharp response over beats that echoed resilience and defiance. Celebrities took notice, sharing praise. Activists celebrated a rare moment where truth pierced the polished armor of political theater. Journalists scrambled to capture the significance. Headlines read, Jasmine Crockett silences Romney in justice reform hearing, and new star shines as old guard stumbles. Comments poured in, thousands strong. She didn't come to play politics. She came to play chess, and she just checkmated Romney on national TV. This is why representation matters. She's not just speaking for herself, she's speaking for all of us who've been ignored. Finally, someone calling out the hypocrisy and demanding real change. Across platforms, the ripple effect was undeniable. People didn't just see Crockett's words, they felt them. They shared them with pride, tagging friends and family, sparking conversations about respect, experience, and power. The nation was watching, and the verdict was clear. Jasmine Crockett's voice had broken through the noise, validated by millions who had long waited for someone to speak with such courage. In the aftermath, it wasn't just a political moment. It was a cultural reckoning, proof that dignity, honesty, and grit could still move mountains in a world that desperately needed it. And as the dust settled, one question lingered in the air. How would the establishment respond now that the people had spoken so loudly? This wasn't just a debate about experience or credentials. It was a battle over whose story gets to shape the conversation about justice, struggle, and the very soul of America. Who decides what counts as qualified to speak on these issues? For too long, that power has rested with those insulated by privilege, dismissing the voices of those who live the reality every day. Jasmine Crockett reminded the room and the entire country that dignity doesn't require permission. It only requires courage. Courage to stand firm when questioned, to speak truth in the face of doubt, and to demand respect not as a favor, but as a right. She didn't raise her voice for applause or validation. She stood her ground because the truth deserved its moment, because justice isn't polite, and progress isn't quiet. In that moment, Crockett wasn't just defending her own experience. She was lifting up countless others who have been told they don't belong. Her strength was a beacon, shining through the old guard's resistance, proving that dignity is non-negotiable and that real change begins when courage meets conviction. And as the country watched, inspired and empowered, one truth echoed loud and clear. Respect is earned not through pedigree, but through the relentless fight for justice. This wasn't just a takedown. It was a powerful reclamation of voice, a moment that reminded us all who truly deserves to be heard. Jasmine Crockett's courage is a call to action for everyone who believes in justice, dignity, and change. If you believe voices like hers belong at the table, it's time to amplify them. Like, subscribe, and share the story far and wide. Let them know we hear you, we see you, and we've got your back. Whose side are you on?